Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Blessed Friday, everybody. This is the second part video about Ernest Hemingway's short story, Indian Camp. Before getting started, let me first thank all those students who took part in the discussion on the platform. I read through all of your answers, and actually there are excellent commands, so I encourage all the students to go back to these commands and read through the answers of your colleagues and learn from each other. So this video is kind of recapitulation and general feedback on your answers to the second part study questions. Let's start with the initiation story. I asked you about the initiation story. The initiation story is a plot which puts the main character in the story, or the protagonist, into an eye-opening experience. So that is, the main character or the protagonist goes through a new experience, a life-changing one, profound one, which gains him or her some degree or extent of maturity, of understanding. You know, maturity, to be mature, M-A-T-U-R-E. That is why an initiation story, particularly when it is about a child, and most often they are about children, they are called loss of experience. Loss of innocence. Why? Because the character, a child in this case, is transformed from a state of innocence into a state of experience. They are also called a coming-of-age stories, or it's a coming, for example, Indian Camp is a coming-of-age story. Coming of age, to come of age, is to be mature. Typical examples of initiation stories, particularly in American literature, are Young Goodman Brown by Nathaniel Hawthorne and The Killers by Ernest Hemingway himself. Now let's apply that on Indian Camp. Nick embarks on a journey through which he witnesses intense images, intense scenes of birth and death. And this experience, or this journey, marks his transition from a state of innocence, because he has never been exposed to the scene of childbirth or of death in this way, transition from a state of innocence into a state of experience and understanding. So he comes to an understanding of the nature of death. He gains a new insight, new understanding of the nature of death. Okay, is it a mature understanding? Is it a complete understanding? Is it a correct, if we could say correct understanding? Then, okay, it is for us to discuss and interpret. And we'll come back to that later on, I think, in our discussion in this video. The setting of the story. Setting is a background of story, okay, time, place, and environment or atmosphere. We were introduced into Nick, his father, and the doctor while they were embarking or about to embark on a journey through the lake into the Indian Camp. There is cold water, there is darkness, mist, all of these. And when they arrived in the Indian Camp, there is the bad smell of the room and the miserable condition of the shanty town. So all of these elements convey a sense of gloom, of morbidity in the beginning. So darkness, okay, state of not understanding, of state of ignorance. It's kind of symbolic. Then there is the end, the opening. This is the opening we spoke about. Then there is the closing of the short story, and we'll come back to that later on. The characterization in Indian camp is indirect characterization, because the author shows us through dialogue and through the actions of the characters what the characters are like. It doesn't tell us directly about their attributes or about their characters. So it's an indirect characterization. And I think in the previous video we spoke about Nick and his father, and we contrasted these two characters. Okay, somebody's selling something here in the in the neighborhood. Yes. But let's repeat once again. Nick is a sympathetic character, who exhibits and shows feelings of sympathy, of empathy, and of compassion towards the Indian woman, while his father, in contrast, is detached, disassociated, coldly professional, callous, even hard-hearted, if you could say that. Maybe I should stop letting the guy sell and buy at his well. There is also the characters of the husband and his wife, and the contrast between them. But once again, we'll come back to these two characters when we speak about the themes of the story. So because it is an initiation story and the character is transformed, and there is a change in the understanding of the character or his state of mind and consciousness, he must be a dynamic character. Nick is a dynamic character. That's obvious. His father also, because his father was, as we in the beginning of the story, was enthusiastic, and he wanted to teach his child by introducing him into the experience of childbirth. And he was also proud of his achievement, of his medical achievement as a doctor. But at the end, he regretted bringing his child into the Indian camp in the first place. So he is also a dynamic character. Now the plot, and this is where most of the students missed the point. Particularly, they missed the point at the climax. But so an appropriate ordering of the events in accordance with the plot, with the plot structure, Freytag's plot structure, I think should be something like that. In the exposition, let's mark them with questions in the short story. Where are we going, Daddy? Nick asks in the beginning of the story. So where are we going? So they are going through a lake from a zone which is inhabited by white Americans. We could deduce that from the story, into the Indian camp. In darkness and through mist. And through mist, and they arrived in the Indian camp, and the room smelled bad, and the conditions were miserable. So that's the exposition, because it serves as a background of the story. Then action started to rise when Nick witnesses or is confronted or is shocked by the screams of the woman and her pain, and asks his father to give her something to relieve her pain. Oh, Daddy, can't you give her something to the words? Can't you give her something to make her stop screaming? Something like that, if I still remember. Yeah. So this is the second question, which marks the phase of arising actions. And actions started to get complicated and tense because of the, as I said, the unfavorable conditions and the cesarean operation with primitive tools and yeah, as I said, with unfavorable conditions. The success, he finally made it, and he was proud of his achievement. So all of these actions are right. I agree with you that there is kind of falling here of the actions, particularly after the success of the operation, but still all of these can be included under the category or the phase of rising action. Then there is a climax, which is marked by the suicide of the husband. After the suicide of the husband, actions started to fall in place, and this is the phase of the questions, of Nick's questions, torrent of questions to his father about the nature of death, etc. Do all men kill themselves, Daddy? So I don't think there is Daddy there. Or do all men kill themselves? So this is a phase of falling question, of falling action. It is a phase of trying to understand, of Nick's attempt to understand, to sort out what he saw, or the shocking scenes which he have just seen. Then there is the resolution. In the resolution, there is no question. It is Nick's reflection, Nick's understanding, Nick's decision that he will never die. Okay, this is my understanding of the plot structure. You could, if you disagree with me, please let me know. Now the themes of the story. There is the theme of death, birth and death, life and death. These two, life and death, are one of the points which I think, or the messages of the story, is that life and death are intertwined. They are associated, connected. Yes, interlaced with ed at the end, interlaced, intertwined, okay, which means combined and associated, combined, and cannot be separated. There's always this interlacing between life and death. So Nick witnesses intense scenes, mashahid, and images of life and death, very intense, very shocking ones, okay, in brief interval. So, and two extremes of life. Yeah, and these are the extremes of life and death, birth and death. So, and it is in this instance that he lost his innocence, because he is introduced to what constitutes life itself. Many philosophers like Heidegger, stressed, also Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard, stressed the idea that one is started to die from the moment he is or she is born. From the moment we are born, we started to die. So there is no way death is escapable. Okay, and the birth and death are intertwined, as I said, and life itself and birth and life themselves are interweaved with pain and suffering. So this is the idea, and as I said in a previous video, this idea haunted the consciousness of Ernest Hemingway himself. The second theme is the initiation introduction, and I think we talked about that, but I'd like only to stress the idea here of the incompleteness of the maturity. So yes, in initiation, as I said, there is a transition from innocence into maturity, or from one state to a more mature state. But this state, sometimes we the state of maturity is reached, sometimes it is crossed, sometimes one stops just on its threshold. So in this instance, okay, in the example in the Indian camp, next assertion that you will never die can be interpreted as immature, not mature, immature, double M, immature, non-mature understanding, incomplete maturity. He's still a child, but he's on the edge of passing into adulthood. So he was exposed into death and birth, but still, and he kind of developed some understanding of the nature of that, but still his understanding is not complete, is not wholesome, is not complete understanding is not achieved. Also, there is a relationship between father and son. Father and son. Do you know? I think all of you know Cat Stevens' famous song, "Father and Son." The relationship between the father and son is problematic, and you could find many classics of English literature. Okay, are about this problematic relationship between the father and son. Here it is not that problematic, it's not that tense, but there is, the father wanted to teach and introduce his son into life experiences, but there is more than that also. There is, if you pay attention to the part in which he refers to the doctor, or the father refers to his son as an intern. Intern is a would-be doctor, a medical trainee, طبيب متدرب. So it is, he's still a child, but it is as though he wanted to make his son in his own image, making this somebody in one's image. So this is an expression which is taken from the Bible. I think in Genesis, Genesis is the first chapter of the Bible, that God makes Adam, or made Adam in his own image. وَصَنَعَ آدَمَ عَلَى صُورَتِهِ. I don't want to get into religious discussions here, but this is just a linguistic reference. He wants to make his son in his own image. He's a doctor, and he wants his son to be a doctor like him. He's still young, has not completed his studies yet, but he refers to him as an intern, as a would-be doctor. Sometimes it happens, I think, a lot, and we witness that with our parents. Sometimes the father, imagine he failed, he wanted to be an engineer or a doctor, but he failed, he didn't achieve that, and he wanted to make or just force his son or his daughter to become a doctor, to become an engineer. The mother likewise. Sometimes maybe the mother married a poor man, and she has always dreamed to marry a rich husband, and she forces her daughter to marry this kind of person because he has money, or because he's wealthy, or so on and so forth. So this is projecting so in this case, parents project their own wishes, desires, and dreams into their children without any regard for their children's own dreams and goals. Also, there is the theme of masculinity. This is a feminine situation, okay? The women, or a feminine scene par excellence, a woman, an Indian woman or woman, is giving birth to a child, and she's screaming and suffering from severe pain. But in nowhere in the story do we hear the voice of the women, nor of other women. It's a male dominated scene par excellence. the one who performs the operation is the husband. The one who wanted to teach his son is a male. Also, the scene is witnessed from a male perspective, from Nick's perspective. So nowhere do we hear the voice of women or other women. And the idea, all of the scene is there only to teach, okay, Nick. The teacher is a male, and that who is being taught is another male. So the voice of women is kind of suppressed. Also, masculinity and femininity. Now let's go back to the husband and the Indian woman. Now the Indian woman screams and suffers vocally. That is, she screams in pain, she cries, she weeps as it is expected of her in such a situation. But the husband suffers silently. He's silent. He committed suicide. He couldn't even resist. He couldn't stand the situation. Okay, while the Indian woman is resistant, is stronger than him, is capable, is withstanding the terrible conditions and the suffering. The husband is in contrast. Proves to be weaker than her. So it is as if the concept of femininity and masculinity are reversed. Okay, the masculine becomes a feminine and feminine becomes masculine. Actually, there are a lot of studies. Okay, I won't say a lot of, but a couple of studies which proves that women prove to be stronger in situations, in calamities, in disasters and hard conditions. I remember one study which was conducted a long time ago about women in, I think it's a Japanese study, about women in earthquakes, and how stronger they proved to be in contrast to their to the males who collapsed under the shock. I finished this video with a discussion of the style in Indian camp, and I will briefly speak about certain stylistic elements in this short story. To begin with, there is a motif, M-O-T-I-F. Motif is a recurrent, or that is a repeated idea, image, or structure in the short story. So because it is repeated, it is something which is there for purpose. For example, in Indian camp, we can notice the repeated structure of contrast in the short story. For example, contrast between the opening and the end, darkness in the beginning and daybreak and in the closing of the story, cold water in the beginning and warm water at the end, mist and lack of visibility at the beginning and daybreak, and visibility and the end. Also, in the opening of the story, we see how the father puts his arm around Nick, who is sitting next to him, while at the end the father is rowing while Nick sits at the back, at the stern in the boat. So, which indicates that there is some kind of distance, kind of independence of Nick, who comes to understand life or the nature of that, and becomes, or partially becomes, or barely started to be independent from his father's supervision, control, and orientation. Also, there is contrast between husband and and the wife, the husband in the top, the wife at the bottom, on the bank. The husband is weak. The wife is stronger and could resist. There is also contrast between the attitudes of the father. The father wanted Nick to pay attention, to observe the operation and the cesarean operation, but Nick is detached and turns his back to what's going on. So, and the father, but when the father wanted to turn Nick off the scene of the suicide of the husband, Nick wanted to see what's going on. Now the father in the beginning, the father is supposed to teach Nick and give him answers. Now it is Nick who asks the father, and the father doesn't know. I don't know, barely enough. We see those expressions in the previous video. So there is this kind of structure of contrast in the short story, and it is there for purpose. This is for the motive. Secondly, there is symbolism. The symbol, the lake itself here is a symbol from crossing from one world into another world, from the world of which it separates the world of white Americans, who are, we could understand that, who are educated. Okay, Nick's father is a doctor, and in the world of the Indian Americans, who are helpless, who are poor, who live in abject conditions. So there are two worlds there, and also separated the lake, separated the world of, or the state of, ignorance and innocence, and the state of experience. So Nick has to cross the lake, has to cross certain experiences, has to go through certain experiences. The lake here is symbolic of maybe of life experiences, these life experiences. So has to cross them, to go through them in order to pass or into the state of experience and understanding. There is also number 3, there is irony. Irony is when there is when things do not seem as they really are. Things in reality do not seem as what they really are. Or sometimes when what we expect from something proves to be the opposite of what we expected in the first place. So what is ironic here, is the enthusiasm, for example, of the doctor and his pride of his achievement, of his medical achievement after the success of the cesarean operation, is soon deflated, is soon overturned. Deflate, deflate, تفش كما كنقولوا بالدارجة. Deflated or overturned by the suicide of the husband. It is as though, you are enthusiastic about something, you are proud about something, but soon everything is overturned. This is kind of ironic. This, like, let me give an example. Like somebody, for example, in the class, actually, I remember that scene when I was a student. One of our colleagues was, I think that's in the secondary school, was bragging about his capacities in biology, and he brags about his answers in the quiz, and he insists that he will get the best mark in the class. But it turns out that he got really not even the average, but very, very terrible mark. I don't know how that happens. Okay, he's not anyway an excellent student, but he's not a bad one as well. But you know, this is kind of ironic. Somebody's bragging about having the best mark in the class, but turns out to have, for example, the least mark in the quiz. So that's kind of ironic. But something also which is ironic is that Hemingway himself, and there are, you know, critics identify Nick here. By the way, Nick is a character in a couple of short stories by Hemingway, not only this short story. And they identified Nick as Hemingway himself while he was being a child. So this is kind of autobiographical, fictional autobiographical account of Hemingway. These stories, this series of stories are kind of or semi-autobiographical of Hemingway, because Hemingway's father also was a doctor. So there is a strong connection between him and Nick. So Nick, who asserts at the end of the story that he will never die, some critics read it as he will never commit suicide like the husband did, but it turns out that Hemingway himself committed suicide and died. So yeah, so that's also kind of ironic. I'll finish by number 4, by the language. The language in Indian camp is very minimalistic. You know what is the minimalistic? There is no. It's not a flowery language with a lot of descriptions, with long sentences. No, very minimalistic. That is, it is stripped to its bones, to its bare bones. Okay, the skeleton of language. So very simple sentences, yet very concise, eloquent, and expressive sentences. Hemingway's style is he tends to write in graphic. To write sentences like graphic images, graphic scenes, like pictures, like that, right? So, yeah, but graphic images which are short, brief, but leave many gaps, and these gaps you as a reader you are required to fill with your imagination, with your interpretation, with your questions, and with your answers. Okay, otherwise we will not discuss Indian Camp, this short story. Why we are discussing it? Because it is a classic short story, because it needs interpretation, it needs understanding. What does he mean by that? What does when he will never die? What he means? What does the incident of the contrast between darkness in the beginning and light at the end signify, etc., etc. So he and this is actually a very good style to emulate. Okay, to emulate. Yeah. So, as I think I told you that on the platform when we discussed writing problems, that many students tend to write long sentences sometimes even without punctuation, and the outcome is terrible. Okay, syntactical and structural mistakes, let alone mistakes in mechanics, etc., and verb tenses. So the more you write in long sentences, the longer the sentences you write, the more mistakes you make. So please, this is a golden advice: write short sentences, yet short but lucid sentences. Yeah, so I will stop here, and I will say goodbye, and see you in another video, inshallah. Right. Assalamu alaikum.